Waiting. A short story by Ron Mackenzie Lafergie. Narrated by him also. Part 1. Phil. This is a story about a man named Phil. Phil lived in Plout, a small town ruled by an evil moose named Grimly Ornwood. Plout was a quiet town filled with people and animals and spooky ghosts which hid in cereal boxes. It was also the location of a magical portal to another land. Unfortunately, nobody would ever find that portal, so it's not relevant to this story. Phil lived a fairly dull life. Every day he got up, ate breakfast, chased away the ghosts that popped out of his cereal, got dressed, had a shower, then changed into some dry clothes and went to work. On the way, he would say hello to his neighbors. There was Chippy the chipmunk, Beavis the buffalo, and Hank the hippopotamus. When he saw Fred the armadillo, he avoided eye contact because his name wasn't alliterative and that was unacceptable. According to the unspoken rules of Plout, only Grimly Ornwood was supposed to have a non-alliterative name. So, nobody talked to Fred, though he didn't seem to mind. One fateful day, Phil, whose full name was Phil the Person, for those wondering how he got around the rule, arrived at work exactly 7 minutes early, as he did every day. For a moment, he pondered how this might be the case, since logic dictated that he couldn't walk at the exact same pace every day, but as usual, the thought soon passed. Phil entered the building and submitted to an ocular pat-down from Oliver the Owl, who quickly cleared him. Oliver and Phil were good friends, so the pat-down wasn't exactly thorough, but Oliver knew he could trust Phil. Or could he? Yes, he could. Or could he? Yes. Or could he? Phil took the elevator up to the 7th floor. The door opened, and he very nearly bumped into the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Long legs led up to a curvy waist, which supported a slim torso and humble bosom. All of this supported a long, lean neck and big, beautiful eyes. In fact, the neck was very long, exceedingly long. As you've probably guessed, she was a giraffe, and she was enchanting. "Oh, hi," muttered Phil as he stared at the giraffette. He cursed himself for not coming up with something more suave. She giggled. "Hi," she said, as she brushed past him onto the elevator. Her chipper attitude made Phil relax a bit, and when the smile faded into a slight smirk, Phil felt like she might even be interested. But he quickly stopped entertaining that idea. Wishful thinking will only hurt you in the end. Nonetheless, Phil stood there, entranced. Normally, he would be almost at his desk by now, so that he would sit down at exactly 9:08 a.m., which was, strangely, the time he was supposed to start work. And, until today, it was the time he had started work every single day. But today, he was frozen as the elevator door closed and continued to climb. When he realized what had happened, he began to sweat. What would happen if he wasn't working at 9:08? Would he be fired? Would the world end? Probably not that one, but there was no way to know. And he was about to find out. The elevator stopped at the 18th floor, the top floor of the building, and Phil waited to let the lady off first. The gorgeous giraffe exited, giving him a furtive glance as she did so. Phil gulped, looked around, and followed her. He was in too deep to stop now. How deep did this rabbit hole go? Or rather, how high did this giraffe elevator go? Phil followed his muse down a long, dark hallway. Strangely, it was lit with torches, unlike the rest of the building, which just used glass boxes filled with fairies like normal. It felt pretty ominous. As he trudged down the hall, he noticed a large doorway on the far end of the wall, where a colorful, flashing light could be seen through the crack underneath. Phil was intrigued by it, but not as intrigued as he was by the giraffe, who looked almost as good from behind as she did from the front. As they approached the door, Phil could feel excitement bubbling up inside him. What would be past the door? There was only one way to find out. The giraffette stood to the side, watching him. He didn't say a word, instead reaching for the door handle, which resembled a gnarled tree branch. As his hand touched it, he felt a jolt of electricity. And Suddenly, he was at his desk at work. He looked around, confused. Had he fallen asleep? He looked at the clock. 9:15. Shaking off the bewilderment, Phil got to work. Part 2. Ginger. This is a story about a woman named Ginger. Ginger was a traveling salesperson who went from town to town selling brooms and shoes and cookbooks. She enjoyed her work, but dreamed of more. She wanted adventure. She wanted intrigue. And she would have it. One day, she traveled to a small town to peddle her wares. She loved that phrase, peddle her wares, despite the vaguely negative connotations, so she used it as often as she could. As do I. After making a few cold calls from her shabby motel room, Ginger had some breakfast. Oatmeal. The instant kind with the little candy dinosaurs that melted out of eggs. She gazed longingly at the sealed box of cereal she kept in her suitcase, but like every morning, decided against it. She loved cereal, but after one particularly horrifying experience with a cereal ghost, she'd gone off the stuff. One of her cold calls had been successful, so she got dressed, hopped in the shower, changed, and headed out. She realized halfway to her destination that she'd forgotten to brush her teeth, so she stopped into a convenience store and grabbed a pack of gum. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. She shoved 2 pieces into her mouth and slowly chewed as she returned to her car and drove the rest of the way. She pulled into the parking lot and entered through the front door of Branson & Co., a company that sold books and walnuts. She was met by a rather friendly-looking owl who went to welcome her but suddenly started coughing. "Sorry," he mumbled between coughs. "Turns out I can't breathe saliva." Ginger gave a small chuckle and waited for the man to regain his composure. He straightened back up and turned to her. "How may I assist you?" he asked. "Hello, I'm here to meet with..." Ginger fumbled with her purple notebook, finding the correct page. "Mr. the Goat on floor 7. We have a meeting to talk about cookbooks." Ginger really wanted to continue because once she got started talking, she had a hard time stopping, but she'd been making a point recently to be less talkative. She was worried people found it annoying. Plus, she felt so mysterious being a woman of few words. The owl, whose name was Oliver according to his name tag, smiled, nodded, and motioned towards the elevator. Ginger nodded back, biting back the urge to say goodbye, and strolled as mysteriously as possible towards the elevator. It arrived shortly, and she headed up to the 7th floor. On her way up, she spat out the gum into its wrapper, tucking it away into her bag. Her mouth still felt a bit gross, but it was better than morning breath. The meeting went poorly, though her breath had little to do with it. It was clear from the start that the man had no intention of buying her cookbooks. Ginger was blessed and yet cursed with a rather attractive voice, and it was not uncommon for businessmen to agree to a meeting simply to see if her looks matched her voice. As it happens, they did. Ginger tried to make the best of it, leaning into the infatuation a bit in an attempt to make a sale, but to no avail. Hey, that rhymed! After one too many lingering glances, Ginger politely excused herself, saying she had another meeting to get to. As she went to leave, Mr. the Goat stopped her and said, "Look, I'm sorry I couldn't help you, sweetheart." Ginger grimaced on the inside, but maintained a positive exterior. "You should try Fred up in marketing, 17th floor. Tell him Gary sent you. He might know somebody who can help you." Ginger thanked him, kindly but firmly rejected his attempt at a hug, and left the room. As she closed the door behind her, she recomposed herself, not wanting to seem as frazzled as she felt. It had been a bit of a dry spell lately, and every failure wore on her more and more. Still, she would see what this Fred had to say. Maybe she could pull a win out of this day yet. As she walked back towards the elevator, she again tried to maintain the collected, mysterious demeanor she'd been working on. This helped to keep her mind off her troubles and gave her a confidence she didn't normally have. She arrived at the elevator and pressed the call button, and the elevator dinged right away. When it opened, she went to walk in, thinking it empty, but stopped quickly when she realized there was a man inside. He was thin and wiry, and a good head shorter than her, but he had an adorable deer-in-the-headlights look that made Ginger swoon a little. "Oh, hi," muttered the man. Again, Ginger was charmed by his utter lack of charm. "Hi," she said, about to launch into small talk, but then she remembered herself and brought back the mysterious demeanor. She turned to the panel and made to press the button for the 17th floor, but accidentally hit the one beside it. Floor 18. Crap. Ginger glanced at the man beside her, who seemed to be actively avoiding eye contact. She didn't want her mistake to be known, so she just played it cool, as if she had meant to press 18. As the elevator rose, she realized that 18 was the only number lit up, which meant that the man hadn't pressed a button. This made Ginger more than a little uncomfortable. She'd had her fair share of weirdos follow her, and while this guy seemed harmless enough, they so often did. Until they weren't. As the door opened at floor 18, Ginger hoped the man would get off so she could escape the situation. When he did not, and in fact seemed to be waiting for her to go ahead of him, Ginger felt she had no choice and left the elevator, closely followed by the little man. As she passed him, she tried to give him a look that said, "No funny business," but she wasn't sure she'd gotten the point across. The hallway was unlike any she'd seen in the building so far. It was lit with torches, which would have been quite beautiful in other circumstances, but her growing apprehension made them seem rather ominous. She got to the end of the hall and came upon a large, ornate door. Lights could be seen flashing through the crack in the bottom, and again, Ginger might have found them intriguing if she wasn't so uncomfortable. And not wanting to enter through this strange door, and hoping that the man knew what he was doing, Ginger stepped to the side, allowing him to go first. Hopefully, she thought she could go back to the elevator once he stepped inside. The man gave her a look she couldn't quite identify, and she smiled back, urging him along. Slowly and oddly cautiously, the man reached for the door handle, then vanished. Ginger could not believe her eyes. One moment he was there, and the next, poof, gone. She looked around, hoping this was some elaborate prank, and Axe the Australian Shepherd would jump out and start laughing, but no. There was only a grim silence, along with the light crackling of torches. Ginger looked at the door. She looked at the elevator. She looked back at the door. Every muscle in her body was screaming at her to go back to the elevator and go down to 17. Better yet, just get the hell out of this building and leave town forever. But she couldn't do it. Her curiosity was too strong. Would she, too, disappear if she touched the door? Where would she go? There was only one way to find out. This mysterious dame was going to solve this mystery. Slowly, one might say gingerly, the giraffette reached for the door and knocked. Part 3. Biff. Waiting. Always waiting. I don't know why I wait, but I do. I sit, and I think, and I wait. Someday, the wait will be over. I don't know what I will do then. Maybe write a book, or maybe I'll just wither away and die. It all seems the same to me. I either wait, or I don't. There is nothing else. Was that a knock at the door? No, just the wind, or a mouse, or a ghost, or a gnome. Probably a gnome. How long have I been here? Too long. Too long to remember. Too long for anyone to remember. What if I just left? Would that change anything? I was put here to wait, but if I stop waiting, what then? Would I be replaced? What would life be without waiting? What would I do? What could I do? I wait. Always waiting. Part 4. A Meeting. Ginger waited. She was pleased to see that she had not, as far as she could tell, disappeared after touching the door. However, she could neither see nor hear any change from the other side of the door. She waited another 10 seconds, then, deciding that nobody was coming, reached for the doorknob. Before she reached it, however, a voice came from inside.
"Who is it?"
asked a gruff voice with more than a hint of caution.
"What are you doing here?"
Said Ginger, trying to think of an explanation.
"Speak up!" cried the voice. "You're talking through a door."
Exclaimed Ginger, before realizing he probably didn't need to hear that bit. She thought for a moment, then continued. My name is Ginger the Giraffe. I came to this floor by mistake, and I—
"You did what with a steak?"
replied the voice. No, yelled Ginger, even more loudly. I came to this floor by mistake, and I wasn't sure—
"Oh, for Pete's sake,"
came the voice, and then the door swung open, and Ginger was blinded by a myriad of colorful lights. She covered her eyes with her arm as they adjusted, and soon she could make out the silhouette of a person on the other side of the door.
Come in,"
said the gruff voice, seeming at once excited and thoroughly frustrated. It seemed that he did not like being disturbed, yet was intrigued by his visitor. Ginger carefully walked forward, still covering her eyes as they transitioned from the dark hallway to the bright, colorful room. When she was able, she opened her eyes fully and was a bit disappointed. Because of all the colorful lights, she had expected to see a room full of marvelous art and whimsy. Instead, it was just a large room with a single chair and a desk. On the far side, there was a small cot and what seemed to be a toilet just sitting there on its own next to a rusty sink. The walls were bare, the carpet was plain, and there was nothing else to see aside from a giant disco ball on the ceiling, which sent lights flashing about the place. Ginger felt certain that she would go insane if she had to stay here for any period of time. Her companion, who she could now see was a beaver, crossed the room to the desk and sat in the chair. This left Ginger without a place to sit, but that didn't seem to bother the beaver. She made her way to the desk and stood opposite him.
"Okay, what were you saying?"
he asked as he leaned back in the chair, tilting dangerously far backwards but never quite tipping. He put his hands behind his head and seemed utterly at ease. Well, started Ginger, I was saying that I came here by accident, and I didn't want to disturb you, so if you're busy, I can just— She turned to leave.
"Hang on,"
interrupted the beaver, and Ginger stopped.
"You may have come here by mistake, but it was no accident. I've been waiting here for—"
He trailed off, staring into space for a few moments before returning.
"I've been here a while, and I've never had a visitor. That must mean something."
The beaver sat forward in his chair, pondering hard. He absent-mindedly flicked his wrist towards the door, and it slammed shut of its own accord. How did you do that? Asked Ginger, bewildered.
"Oh, I'm a wizard,"
replied the beaver nonchalantly.
"Or something. I don't know. I can kinda do whatever I want in this room. Watch."
Suddenly, the disco light turned off, the floor and walls turned to a beautiful mahogany hardwood, and artwork booped into place. Not just any artwork either, but famous pieces. The Mona Lizard, the Howl, furless descending a staircase. The ceiling even replicated the creation of Adam the Aardvark with a beautiful chandelier softly illuminating everything. Now this was a room.
"Better?"
he asked as a comfy chair materialized across the desk from him next to Ginger. Well, yes, it is, cried Ginger, sitting down cautiously, uncertain whether this conjured chair would hold her weight. It did. But if you could do that all this time, why have you had that disco light on? And why not redecorate? She was mystified.
"I like disco lights," replied the beaver. "And to be frank, I never exactly expected a visitor, especially one so judgmental of my decorating."
Ginger could see that she'd hurt the man's feelings, so she let the subject drop. She also realized that she had been thoroughly lacking in mysteriousness throughout this interaction, but that was only because the situation was so damn mysterious that any attempt by her would be vastly overshadowed. "So," started Ginger, anticipation building, "could you maybe teach me your magic?" She held her breath. This could be the moment where she left her old life behind, starting a new life of magic and wonder. If she could learn magic, she'd never have to sell a broom, a shoe, or a cookbook ever again.
"Oh, nah,"
replied the beaver, stopping Ginger's daydreaming in its tracks.
"Can't be taught. Sorry."
"But
"It's not that kind of story. Sorry, sweetie."
This time the pet name didn't bother Ginger. It didn't seem to come from a place of condescension, as it had when Mr. the Goat had tried it earlier, but rather seemed to be a moment of true sympathy from the otherwise aloof beaver. This was disappointing to Ginger, and, frankly, to me, your humble storyteller. I was hoping it'd turn out to be a magical tale of learning and acceptance and redemption, and I could become the next J.K. Rowling, minus all the Twitter drama. But no, it was not to be. Not yet, anyway. "Then what am I doing here?" she asked, rather confused by everything that had happened.
"Beats me," replied the beaver. "I'm kinda making this up as I go along. Seriously, I haven't talked to another person in..."
Again, he trailed off. This bugged the crap out of Ginger. If there's one thing an anxious talker hates, it's awkward silences. After a long pause, Ginger spoke up again. "So..." Then it was her turn to trail off, as she realized that she'd been saying the word "so" a lot. He was probably judging her for it. "So," said Biff, an amused smile on his face. Yep, he was judging her. Crap. "Can we leave?" asked Ginger, looking around. "Is that allowed?"
"Allowed?" questioned the man. "I suppose. But why would we? Why not just wait here?"
Again, he leaned back in his chair, apparently content with his lot. As he relaxed, Ginger noticed the paintings on the walls start to sag, and the rich brownish red of the wood started fading to gray. Ginger managed to stand up moments before her chair disappeared as well. Soon the room returned to its drab appearance, minus the disco light. "But wait here for what?" Ginger was getting frustrated with the man and was allowing it to show in her voice.
"Well, anything."
The man seemed perplexed that she would want to know.
"I wouldn't be waiting around here for no reason, so there must be something. I'll just wait and see what it is."
"But what if it's me? What if you were waiting for me? You said you hadn't had a visitor in a while."
"It might be. It just might. But then again, it might not be. What if I left with you and then missed the thing I was actually supposed to be waiting for? No, I'll just play it safe and keep waiting."
"But then you'll be waiting here forever. If you always play it safe, you'll never leave."
"Oh, I'm sure I'll know it when I see it,"
said the man, though Ginger could see some doubt creep into his eyes. She was about to press the issue further when there came a voice from the other side of the door. Part 5. Curiosity. Phil looked at his watch. 9:35. Scarcely 20 minutes had passed, but it had felt like an eternity. Normally, once he got started with his work, time would fly by as words and numbers filtered through his head onto the screen. But today, he just couldn't focus. He could think of nothing but that room at the end of the hallway and the beautiful woman who had led him there. Was any of that real? Had there even been a gorgeous giraffe, or had it all been a dream? He had to know. Phil decided to do what he had never done before: seek out a conversation with his coworkers. Slowly and awkwardly, Phil rose from his seat. All eyes turned to him. This was unheard of. He could see eyes darting to watches and clocks before locking back onto him, wondering what on blurth he could be doing. Oh, yeah, this world was called Blurth. It's like Earth, but blurthier. It's not that important, I just figured you might be confused, especially if you're listening on audio. Anyway, Phil. Yes, Phil had shocked the staff of the office when he bucked the unspoken rule and stood during work hours. He turned to his nearest coworker, Sally the squirrel, who was staring dumbfoundedly back at him, and made to ask if she had seen a gorgeous giraffe earlier, but instead said loudly, "I have to go to the bathroom." Everyone in the room breathed a great sigh of relief, though what they were relieved of, they weren't sure. Phil, on the other hand, kicked himself for having lost his nerve and slowly made his way to the bathroom. Why couldn't he just ask? It was easy. He would just say, "Hey, did you see a pretty giraffe walk through the office earlier?" And they would say no or yes, and then he would have his answer. But it was so much easier in theory than in practice. And now Phil had to go to the bathroom or else he would look really weird. So off he went. However, as he passed the elevator, an odd feeling struck him. It was like the feeling you get when you see the lottery tickets at the grocery store register and you think, what if I'm passing up a winning ticket? What if I bought a ticket on a whim and it changed my life forever? Well, Phil bought the ticket. By which I mean, in case you're lost in the analogy, he got on the elevator and pressed 18. And farted because he'd been holding in the anxious farts all morning. Then he waited as the elevator went up, hoping that nobody came in and smelled his fart. Luckily, nobody did. When the door opened, he was once again met with the dim hallway and the crackling of torches. This was a great relief to Phil, as it meant he hadn't imagined the whole thing, but relief soon made way to worry, as he realized that meant he had actually teleported earlier. He farted again, and then again. The last one was a real stinker, too. So stinky, in fact, that it motivated him to walk down the hall to escape his own destruction. He cautiously made his way down the hallway, looked around for any hidden teleportation traps. Not that he'd know one if he saw it. As he approached, he saw that the colorful lights were no longer shining from under the door, and wondered what that might mean. When he finally reached the door, he instinctually reached for the handle, then pulled back. As the old saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, won't be fooled again. Or something, I don't know. So, not wanting to touch the door, Phil pulled himself up, took a deep breath, and yelled out, "Hello? Is anyone—" Part 6. Destiny. "In there?" The voice startled both Ginger and Biff, whose eyes darted for the door. Biff gazed at the door with suspicion, but Ginger thought she recognized the voice. "Hello?" she asked, walking over to the door herself. "Who's there?" This is Phil," said the voice, though it seemed unsure. "Hello, Phil," said Ginger. "By any chance, did you come up here earlier and, disappear?" "Oh, my blood, yes," cried Phil. Again, blood is the word for God on Blurth, just keeping you in the loop. "You saw that? Oh, then you must be that gorgeous Ginger blushed and waited, but there was silence on the other side of the door. It seemed her mystery man was embarrassed, but she was quite charmed by it. "Yes, I am, and thank you," she replied, with exaggerated happiness to hopefully put the little man at ease. "So, can I come in?" "Oh, right." Ginger opened the door, and Phil walked in, taking great care with each step, as if stepping over a pit of lava. When he was all the way inside, he seemed to relax, and Ginger closed the door behind him. "Thank you," said Phil, looking around. "What happened to the lights?"
"Someone complained about 'em,"
grumbled Biff, which caused Phil, who hadn't yet noticed the beaver, to jump about a foot in the air and let out a high-pitched scream. Again, he was thoroughly embarrassed, and Ginger was thoroughly charmed. Phil cleared his voice and tried to act cool. Who are you?"
"Biff,"
replied Biff, and he left it at that. This was his first time interacting with people in, well, a while, and his social battery was already depleted. "He's waiting for something," filled in Ginger, "but he doesn't know what." Then she paused and added, "I think he's just scared to leave."
"I am not scared to leave,"
exploded Biff, leaping out of his chair.
"In fact, I'm leaving now, because as luck would have it, this man—"
He went to grab Phil's shoulder,
Is...
and Biff disappeared. Part 7. Homecoming.
the man I was waiting for?
Biff trailed off as he looked around at his new surroundings. Or, rather, his old surroundings. He looked down and saw the familiar, creaky hardwood floor. He gazed around and took in the stained wooden walls covered with framed photos and wonderfully ugly children's artwork. He breathed deep and smelled the deliciously musty smell of home. Home. He was home. How long had it been? He wasn't sure. He knew he had been waiting in that room for some time, but for all he knew, it could have been 10 years or 10 minutes. Time felt foggy. He thought back to his time in the waiting room. He could still feel the intense sense of purpose, the need to wait, the pleasure he got from doing what he was meant to be doing. But now it just felt hollow, artificial. At the time, he thought he had found the secret to life, the secret to happiness. But now, he wondered if it was all a lie.
Well, there you are.
Biff jumped at the sound of a woman's voice. He turned and nearly fell over.
Bonnie!
Biff rushed over to the cute little beaver woman and embraced her. It was his wife. Of course it was his wife. How had he forgotten her? Bonnie, his high school sweetheart, his love, his bride, the mother of his children. Wait, children?
Where are the kids?
He asked, looking around desperately.
I need to see them.
His wife pulled back and looked at him with slight concern.
They're at their houses, sweetie, with their families. You know that.
Biff thought for a moment and found that he did indeed know that. But he wasn't sure how. In his mind, he felt certain that his 3 kids were 8, 10, and 12 years old, but he felt new memories fading into place. They had, in fact, grown up and left the house. They had gone to college, and he had worked hard to help them pay for it. 2 of them had families of their own, and the 3rd was across the world studying something to do with trees. He knew what had happened in their lives, but it felt like they were second-hand memories, like they had been relayed to him by someone else. He knew it had happened, but he couldn't tell a single story from that time. His mind was full of scribbled notes, most of which were illegible to him. But no more.
Sweetie, said Bonnie, you'll be late for work.
She reached down and picked up a brown leather briefcase, which she held out to her husband.
No,
Biff replied, dropping the briefcase to the floor and embracing his wife once again.
I won't.
Part 8. Waiting. I've never really felt like my life had purpose. Don't get me wrong, I've filled my time and done what I was supposed to do, at least what I thought I was supposed to do, but it felt empty. When I was a kid, I did my homework. I got good grades. I followed the rules. I listened to adults and did what I was told. Then I went to university. I studied. I drank. I worked. I drank. And I drank some more for good measure. I didn't like the taste. I didn't even particularly like being drunk. But it's just what I was supposed to do. I was in college. You drink in college. Then I got a job. I worked. I kept my head down. I showed up every day on time, started work at 9:08, ate lunch at 1:08, and left at 5:38. Every day. Until today. Today, I did something I wasn't supposed to do. And now, I have a purpose. I don't know how I know. I just know. What I need to do is wait. She wouldn't understand. 5 minutes ago, I wouldn't have understood. But now, it couldn't be more clear. I know what I must do. And it is bliss. I Wait.